Hello, so I'm Kelly Hopley and I am a nutritional therapist and also run several nutrition businesses.
Amazing. Right. Firstly, Kelly, right? What really got me drawn to you was the program where you were talking about a program that you said that you were doing, like teaching doctors about nutritional health and trying to take a holistic approach
Mm,
instead of like prescribing pharmaceutical drugs. So that's what really caught my
that's
attention
what
with
caught your
you. And
attention.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, what I teach for an organisation called the Institute of Optimum Nutrition, and they, or I suppose the ION for short, was developed by Patrick Holford back in the 80s. So it's been around. In fact, it's the 40th birthday this year. And that has evolved as time's gone on, as nutrition evolves, of course. But Patrick had the mindset really that to heal or to help with health, I suppose, allow the body to heal itself. I think that's probably the better phrase. Then
yeah,
you have to consider that all the body systems work together. And he felt that you had to look at food as a medicine as opposed to the enemy. And I think the rest is history really with ION, and the courses have developed from there. And of course, there's been hundreds and hundreds of alumni now that have come through and developed their own nutrition businesses.
mm,
But and I think it was a dream really for ION to develop something called a graduate diploma. And with that, it is a postgrad. So it doesn't have to be a doctor, it doesn't have to be a medic. It can be someone with a science degree who's a health professional in a different area. But it was interesting when the course started that we did start attracting medics to this way of considering medicine, I suppose. But obviously, integrative functional medicine and integrative personalised nutrition rather than prescribing pills. So that's sort of the background as to what I do. And of course, it's been and is a very popular course because it's looking at the other side of how the body can help itself, really.
yeah. So it seems like you're fighting a battle against like the big corporate pharmaceutical companies, and where do you think you stand a chance in like overcoming like the pharmaceutical drug industry for health and well-being for people?
Yeah, I think my viewpoint on this is that everything has a place. And
Mm.
my dream, this is, a post, not a post, but before I started working for ION and any of that sort of stuff, my dream as a nutritional therapist is that we would be able to work together. And, we can't deny, I don't think, however natural and however holistic, I want to be with what I do, and certainly with the way that I
Mm.
run my life and all that sort of stuff. But, however much there are times when medications are required and there's nothing that you can do for that condition other than that. However, my viewpoint is that there's many chronic conditions that could benefit from a different way of thinking or even an adjoined way of thinking. So I think
Mm.
rather than seeing it as us and them, which is easy to do, I think sometimes it's easier to think, okay, well, at some point somewhere, somebody has to start evolving or making a difference. And, these, I suppose, are the revolutions, too strong a word, but things don't happen without somebody starting that chain. And I think for me, this comes with education. And certainly, the medics that I've trained on the course as time's gone on, for the first few weeks, I think most of them would agree that, it's quite an alien world to look at the body as a whole, as opposed to look at one individual part of that body. So I think that's one thing to consider. But as soon as that approach starts to be considered and learned, then all of a sudden things do start to make a lot more sense. But you still are right in what you're saying. We are still two very different, very separate ways of working. And even, the medics who do train to do personalised nutrition and integrative nutrition, they still have to wear two hats. So when they're doing their integrative nutrition, that's what they're doing, and when they're doing the medical practice, that's what they're doing. I think that the most interesting question is why are they looking to learn about this? So what is it that's made them think, hang on a minute, this is important? Because I think, as far as I'm aware, or as far as I'm told, the study of nutrition at medical school is less than a couple of days. And yet if you think about food, it's such a huge part of what we do in our lives that it has to be considered as let food be thy medicine, which is what one of the first ever medics said. So for me, it's just common sense that we need to sort of scale it back a little bit and go back to, okay, well, should it always be a pill for an ill, or are there some ways or some things that you can do quite differently? But the things are maneuvering and they are changing. I think it's easy to sort of have that negative outlook, and certainly from a nutritional point of view, we've been frustrated for a long time when you just think, just consider the nutrition rather than just handing out a pill. But things are changing, and I've certainly seen a huge swathe of change where people, for example, with diabetes, are being offered plans to consider their nutrition, and that never would have been considered 5 or 10 years ago. And quite a few chronic conditions are now being looked at in terms of, okay, what can we do, not necessarily to cure, but what can we do to improve the symptoms? What can we do to improve the management of this condition for this individual?
Through a holistic approach rather than prescribing pharmaceutical drugs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you think about it, I get my students to think, whether this is, with ION or whether it's, personally, I get my, clients and students to think, right, okay, well, if you were, let's say somebody came in and they've got a headache, if you went to a GP, then, that GP is very limited for time. So it's very difficult to have those extended conversations, really. And so really at the top of their priority at that point is this something sinister that I need to deal with? Okay. But if you, and maybe you might get asked a question about, how's your eyesight and all that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, the tools at the disposal of the GP are, quite limited in terms of things like that. And like you say, it's the pharmaceuticals. Yeah, I can give somebody a drug to try and help with a headache, or I can, refer and they can have a scan and you see if something's going on that's, needs more or warrants more attention. But, for us, if someone sees a functional medicine practitioner or a nutritionist, then we're looking at that headache in several different ways. So we ask a whole barrage of questions to find out, okay, is it dehydration? Is it something you're eating? Is it to do with hormones? Is it to do with stress? Is it lack of sleep? The list goes on. And so we join all those body systems, together to find out, okay, well, it's no use to us looking at the headache without considering what's happening, in the immune system, lifestyle, exactly, without figuring out what's happening with the hormones. It's almost a useless task from our point of view, because we need to say, okay, well, what's the root cause of this? The headache is more than likely the symptom. So what's the root cause? And then if we can track back to find the root cause, often we can make a big difference, and that root cause as well can be literally rooted in something that happened many, many years ago, so sometimes it's related back to, someone had to have a surgery to have a certain organ out or whatever it happens to be. And they might say, since then this has happened, or it might be, I don't know, we did lots of work in the house and there was loads of paint and we changed all the carpets, and ever since I've had less allergy, so it's looking at the wider lifestyle, the wider environment, as well as obviously food.
Yeah, compared to when you go to the NHS and they just just treat the symptom rather than looking at the root cause of how the problem arose. It sounds similar to the Chinese approach to medicine. I've
It's
not.
not.
Yeah.
I would
Sorry,
say it's
carry
not
on.
dissimilar. It's not dissimilar to the Chinese approach. I think with the sort of traditional Chinese medicine, there's more aspects to consider.
Okay.
But certainly in terms of the interlinking of organs and how they might have an impact and show a certain symptom, then definitely I'd say there are similarities. But I mean, in terms of nutrition now, the field has grown so significantly that, as well as everything that I've told you about, looking at the organs and interconnecting and all that sort of stuff, and looking
Mm,
at food and lifestyle. I mean, now we're going as far as looking at what we call nutrigenomics. So actually looking at gene coding and, is
yeah.
that pathway doing what it should be to
Okay.
enable that particular, body function to occur. And there's a lot of work going on, around ADHD and those sorts of
Mm,
conditions with gene coding. And of course, I think probably people know about, the gene, the BRCA gene for breast cancer, that, if people know that they've got it, then, I'm not saying they can stop that happening, but they can make decisions based on knowledge.
yeah. So would you say, based on knowledge, would you take that? Would you take a nutritional approach in a scenario like that?
Yeah, I mean, you could do. It just depends, of course, on, what you're dealing with in that particular individual. But I think it's
Okay.
same as anything. The nutritional approach is just part of the journey. It's part of
Okay.
the program. So, particularly if we went back to ADHD and you found that there was a particular gene coding that gave
Mm,
that person more of a problem with how would you say, like detoxing a certain component, or indeed they had an issue with maintaining a certain vitamin or similar or essential nutrient, then of course you can then say, well, that pathway is in some way affected. We'll do our best to prop that up.
okay.
But there's a lot more to it as well. Particularly conditions like that. There's a lot of how would you say? I think trauma is probably too strong a word, but having said that, with some of my friends who suffer ADHD would probably say it isn't
Mm,
too strong a word. But there's a lot of people that's been trying to cope in a society for a long time with conditions like that that's not particularly suited to their condition. So,
yeah.
people who've tried to go the way through school and been labelled as, being
Yeah.
naughty when it's not that at all. So I think, there's lots of things to consider, but certainly
Mm.
nutrition is definitely one of them.
Okay, so I'm gonna take it down the route of functional medicine. If you can give me a bit of detail about what sort of functional medicines, um, what do you call a functional medicine? Would that be something natural?
Yeah, and well, functional medicine is just an umbrella term. And
Okay.
all that means is somebody, or the process of looking at the body as a whole, and the
Okay.
process of looking for that root cause. That's the difference between, you know,
Okay.
traditional medicine, I suppose, and functional. But then some would argue that functional was around first. So, which one's the traditional one, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, certainly functional medicine is just looking at the body as a whole, interconnecting those systems. And the term functional med is actually a very sort of American term, really.
Okay.
Here we tend to call it, integrative personalized medicine, and that is understanding that everybody is different.
These
You
different
can't
body types.
possibly work
Mm.
on a standard protocol for somebody who is 82 in a nursing home with a condition, and then somebody else who's got the same condition who is 18 and
Mm.
I don't know, in a football team, for example. You just can't, it's impossible. So, if we go back to traditional nutrition, looking at the eat well plate, now that used to be, you have so much carbs, so much protein, so much
Yeah.
fat, 5 a day and all this sort of stuff. And, we're sort of moving quite a far way away from that now, and understanding that, yeah, okay, well, for some people, that personalized approach will be to be vegan. But for somebody else, that
Mm.
personalized approach will be to be carnivore. And for some,
Okay. So
you see what I mean?
Yeah. So, coming to the personalized approach, would I be right in saying that this would be based on your DNA? Would you have on your blood type? And is that how you determine what sort of a diet would be more suitable for yourself based on your
Yeah,
blood type?
it's a good question because there's so
Mm.
many ways of looking at it. You know, there is a blood type diet, and some people will go
Mm.
down that line. And I suppose you could look at, DNA in terms of, well, what would I be used to having if I look back at my ancestry, for example.
Yeah.
And certainly that rang true with me. My ancestry, when we sort of did all that sort of stuff, went back to sort of Northern Europe, which is all the Viking sort of stuff.
Okay.
And I just cannot tolerate grain, in terms of wheat. It just does not suit me at all, so I have to be gluten free. And it's finding out really that that makes an impact, where it's something maybe 5-10 years ago I wouldn't have even considered would have made an impact. But
Mm.
certainly looking at that individual, looking at, okay, also not just DNA and things like that, but they might have religious needs, they might have cultural needs, they might have personal preference as to, this is the way that I want to do it. And hence I feel, more comfortable with that. But certainly, when you do get it right for the individual, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it does incorporate testing. We do
Mm.
testing if we feel that it's required. There's a few tests that I do. I do like a stool sampling test that looks at the makeup of the microbiome, and then what bacteria are in excess, what bacteria are lacking. And then obviously we can match the diet appropriately. But I also do food intolerance testing. So obviously if somebody's got an intolerance, then we could match the diet to that. Um, and then there's people who feel that they get on really well with, the fasting type
Yeah.
approach.
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah, and also like water fast and dry fast, wet fast. I mean,
Mm.
it goes now. It used to be like intermittent fasting, and now the big term is intermittent living. And this is looking at
Mm.
the incorporation of, intermittent fasting, but also incorporating hot tubs, cold tubs. And again, I think there's a place for that, but where I feel, and this is a personal opinion only, but where I feel
Mm.
that people get it wrong is that, you know, for me, we're just probably coming out of winter, but we are still in sort of the last, I suppose, weeks really of winter.
Of
And
winter. Yeah.
with that, your body's not really in the position to start detoxing heavy, So I think if we went back a little bit more to thinking about the seasons and, what grows around us and all that sort of stuff, I
Mm.
think we'd get on a lot better. But I think it's easy to think, oh, supermarkets, etc., they've been around forever, which is not true. In terms of life, they've been around for a very short period of time. And even if I go back to my grandparents, when I was younger, yes, okay, there was a couple of supermarkets, but nothing like there is now. And also, they tended to favour the local corner shop, well, local shop, and then they favour, the bakers and all these individual shops that were basically specialists in what they did. So generally, the produce, tended to be better. And also, you would eat what was around you, because it wouldn't be
Mm.
that you'd be having, strawberries delivered in from here and kiwis delivered in from here. It just wouldn't happen. So your body had naturally the right vibration of foods at the right time of the
Mm.
year. So I think in some ways what we feel is that progress or a blessing has been a little bit of a curse. So that we are now putting our bodies under a lot of digestive stress by not only eating the wrong things at the wrong time, but
Mm.
also, the abundance of highly processed carbs.
Mm.
Everybody's addicted to them. It's
Yeah.
too easy now to get the wrong thing. It's cheaper to get the wrong thing. I mean, whenever should that be
Easier.
easier? Yeah, I mean, you can have Deliveroo, Just Eat, whatever on your doorstep within, 20 minutes max,
Mm.
probably. And I'm not saying you can't get some good stuff through there too, because you probably can. But, the majority of people, I would say, choose more processed, negative, choices. And
Mm.
yeah, there's a lot that needs shaping up in terms of, nutrition. But I think if people just think of, right, okay, well, what works for me, I'll stay in my own lane. Because again,
Mm.
and I think, this is certainly something you'll be familiar with. And I hear from clients every single day when I see, people, whether it be students, clients, whatever, I hear from them, oh, I saw this on TikTok, and
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. And there's some great, information out there. Of course there is, but there's also a lot of bad information that people are picking up on, and it's not necessarily suitable for them in their circumstances.
So, what do you think the disadvantages are for majority of people that think that they're eating healthy? What like sort of effects or side effects that could happen in their body in terms of like eating bad foods and over long periods of time? And say, for example, if the person is thinks that they're eating right, but still maybe you know.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because
Mm,
there's a lot of food myths, I call them.
mm,
Controversies is another word for them. And it's really tough because what we should be going back to really is that natural produce, as I mentioned earlier. And
mm,
yet we've been conditioned, if that's the right word,
yeah.
into thinking differently. I think one of the main controversies that I talk to people about are sweeteners. People have got it into their head that if they're having sweeteners, then they're better for them. And they don't count in terms of, like these Slimming World and Weight Watchers type diets, or, they don't count as a
Mm,
sin or a point or whatever. And yet sweetener is so hard for the body to manage. And not only that, but it really does make a bit of havoc with the blood sugar. I mean, more studies are coming
okay.
out just now actually around this and how the body identifies, sweeteners as a sugar and then realizes actually it's not, and then gets a little bit of in a muddle. And the last thing you want is sort of blood sugar spikes throughout the day. And of course, this is happening when people are constantly having, products such as this.
Mm,
So I think that I would say that's one of the main myths. I think another myth is, things like margarine. Margarine's better than butter. Margarine is not, because it's one. I think it's something like one molecule away from plastic. It's something like that.
oh
Um,
wow.
and butter is, it's a natural product. I know, understand if people have
Okay.
got reasons, vegan, etc., for not
Mm,
using that totally. But if you haven't got issues, either from an intolerance point of view or reasons that you can't have butter, then it's always going to be an easier or more easily digested product than something that's artificial. So I think there's sort of some common myths that I talk about quite often.
mm,
In terms of consequences, I mean, again, it depends on the individual, but personally, I do feel that we are living in an insulin resistant pandemic. And insulin resistance, or what they call metabolic syndrome as well, is when the body really struggles to balance that blood sugar, and yet there
mm,
aren't too many symptoms. And so you get caught into a little bit of a catch-22 because clients will talk about feeling fatigued and
mm,
tired. They'll talk about putting weight on around the middle. They'll talk about feeling groggy, brain fog,
yeah.
all those sorts of things. And an inability to lose weight is another one, all these things, but they will be significantly before you would ever test for diabetes at a GP surgery. Nothing would show. Um, and I think this is the concern, really, that people will go and they'll get these tests and it's like, no, you're fine. But actually, they're already on the journey to diabetes, but they just don't
Yeah.
know they are. So I think at the minute that's the pandemic that we're living in. And I do blame personally, and again, it is a personal opinion, but I do blame, the ever increasing consumption of
Consumer
processed.
market. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very common. I must say, like, I'm a sucker for it as well. But again, for me, it's like paying attention to my body when I've, like, say, for example, I've eaten loads of shit, garbage, and it actually makes me feel so bad. And that itself just makes the body physically stressed, which then makes it easier for you to be prone to mental stress. Then all of a sudden you're kicking off, and it's just like it's a huge downward spiral. And definitely a lot of education on health and nutrition is you can never get enough. You can never get
No.
enough. So
No,
this would
you're right
lead.
in what you say. I think the other thing to mention there is the fact that, the gut, or what they call the microbiome,
Okay.
is the source, or the seat is maybe a better word, of, some of the happy chemicals. So it's so common that I get people come into clinic who have got, gut issues, and they've put on weight and all
Yeah.
those sort of things, but that is directly correlating with, negative low mood.
Mhm.
And it's a real vicious cycle to get into, because if you're eating badly, generally, not always, but often, people do feel a little bit low. Then
Yeah.
because of that, you've not got the motivation to eat better. You've not got the motivation to get out and exercise, and then that chain. So it is about taking, I say to all clients, it's about taking that one step, yeah, on that chain, not just thinking about seeing the whole picture at that point. Just,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? What's that one thing you're going to do today to actually make a difference? Are you going to drink more water, or are you going to reduce your consumption of processed carbs? Or, whatever it is, but it's about breaking that chain and then saying, actually, do you know what? I am waking up and feeling refreshed. I did feel like I could do that. I don't feel like I need that coffee at 3 p.m., or I'm going to have an afternoon slump. But I think we need to remember as well that, there's been a lot of changes with COVID and people working from home, and all those sorts of things. People have had a lot to get used to, and it's been a real tough time to have time to consider diet and nutrition, all those things, because when people are in fear and feeling quite compromised, it tends to be the one thing that goes out the window, actually, when it ought to be the first thing that people are thinking about. But people, there was a lot to concentrate on, wasn't there? People worried about the funds and the finances, and maybe now is the time for people to start thinking, right, time to get back on track.
Yeah, it's easy to give advice about keeping on track, but I think a lot of what I've noticed in society today is that people look for that instant gratification. They're looking for
Yes.
instant results, because doing this sort of work for yourself to improve your health and well-being, and eating good food, and it takes time to see the results. And what people
Really
don't
does.
understand is that it's like looking at a duck in the water. You don't see all the hard work that's going on underneath the water when it's flapping its feet. So
Mm,
it takes a lot of effort and conscious effort on a
mm.
daily basis, and it's easy to fall off the wagon.
Oh,
There's a
it
saying.
really, especially with frequent temptation,
Mm,
and that's the world we do live in. And I couldn't agree with all of that more. It is tough. You've got to want it. You've got to almost, I think, in some respects, have a reason to want it.
yeah, to know your why.
Sadly, I think a lot of the work that comes to me is the people who are reacting to some level of diagnosis or something similar, or even it's diagnosis of a family member, and then something clicks at that point, and it's like, right, I need to do something, which is a shame, really,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we could be so much more proactive. But you're right,
yeah.
you're right. It's never going to be as quick as just taking a pill. It takes
Mm.
effort, discipline, motivation, but absolutely 100% the results are worth it.
Yeah. So in terms of, I'm gonna bring it back to um information, where we get our information from, because there's, like you said, there's so much information out there. How would you know what research to trust?
Blimey, this is, I think we could do a whole
Yeah.
year's podcast on this one. Uh, it's it's really simple. In an age of information, then I've got a saying: if you're not doing your research, then you're an idiot. And that's not to be rude. That's
Yeah.
just to say, look, the information is out there. So you have got now the opportunity to see, what research is coming out about nutrition and health and all that sort
Mm,
of stuff. But you're quite right in terms of the quality. So as with anything, if you going to look at a study, or a research paper, and it's not difficult, you only have to, type something to Google these days, and it
yeah.
comes up. Then you need to be looking at, okay, well, who funded that study? Did they have
Yeah.
a certain outcome in mind? What was the reason for doing that particular study? Or was it somebody who is just wanting to know the truth? What's
Mm,
going to happen if we do this, that, or the other? So I think that's the most important thing. Looking at if you're looking for studies, who's telling you the message, who's giving you the message, and why might they want you to have that message, or is it someone who's very objective? But more than ever before, you've got to be really, really clever and careful in the information that you're hearing, because as I've just mentioned, it's all around us all of the time with social media. So always, some of it is brilliant, as I said, and we're almost quite lucky to have all that information, but just do a bit more digging. So that would be my advice before taking everything at face value.
I guess it's about asking the right questions as well. Even if you find, like for me, if I find somebody that's well credited to get information from, but I'd still question that person.
Absolutely. And I think anyone who is, confident in what they're talking about, whatever profession people are, then you'd welcome that question, all those questions, because it gives you a chance to, engage your audience and explain, where you're coming from. And I think as well, look at, obviously in my case, I'm nutrition, but those people that you are speaking to, just look, what are they doing? It's really simple. What do they do? I think there's a saying, isn't there? If you want to be a millionaire, go find a millionaire. And say, what did you do? How did you get there? And I suppose it's the same in most things. If you want to be fit and healthy and, and live a good old long life, then go speak to somebody who's doing all that. But at the same time, yes, okay, it's nutrition and, it's important. But I do very much believe as well, we have to have a balance. I don't think it's about, living on lettuce leaves. I think it's about, again, it goes back to that full picture, doesn't it? And having all those sort of ducks in a row. So it's not just nutritionally, but it's also the physical, the exercise. It's also having the mental health. It's also having the spiritual side. It's also having, those people around you who you feel supported by. So I think there's a lot that needs to be right and come together rather than just focusing on, one aspect of that.
Speaking about keeping a balanced life, I was looking on your website and I did stumble upon one of your blogs, Unlocking Secrets to Holistic Wellness, the complete guide to a balanced life. So of course, we're talking about nutrition. That's one aspect. What sort of aspect could give a person balance in their life to try and to avoid disease and to just to give you the best out of the food that you're eating and to perform at your best as well? So
yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it's everything that I've just spoke about in terms of, the different areas and trying to get those right. But if we go back to food specifically, then looking at, quality, so if you're going to be buying, meat or fish or whatever, then try and make sure you're getting it from a quality source. If you're getting fish, then try and get wild salmon, for example, rather than farmed. That's not as easy as it sounds, by the way.
Oh yes, I know.
And then, vegetables and things like that, just making sure, of course, none of us can afford, well, some maybe, but most people can't, a full organic trolley, but just making sure that you're getting that produce ideally from somewhere local, if possible. So I think in terms of the nutrition, trying to do that, and it sounds really simple, but if you're picking something up in the supermarket and it's got like 12 or more ingredients, probably even 7 or more ingredients, then you need to be asking yourself a question, and certainly if you can't say half of them, then you need to be asking yourself another question, and then on top of that, I always try and think in my mind, would my grandparents have eaten it? And if the answer is no, then again, is it something I really need and want? We need, as I said, food's so short, enjoyable, and I understand all that, but equally, it is meant to nourish and nurture. And the reason we eat food is to build the body, is to give us energy. There's a reason that we need those building blocks. So I think good quality food is one thing. I think not getting swept into what you think you should be doing in terms of life. I think that's the biggest problem that we have at the moment in terms of life. So we've got this social media culture of this, I should be this, I should be that, doing this and all this sort of stuff. I think that creates a lot of stress.
Mm.
And often, I'll speak to clients and I'll say to them, what brings you joy?
Mm.
I can't tell you how many clients can't answer that question.
Because they're
And
too busy following the crowd. They're
yeah,
not
and that's
finding
sad.
it. Yeah.
That's from my point of view, that's sad. And that really does open some deep conversations about,
Mm.
do you need to work as much as you are, or do you really need to go to, get your coffee 4 times a week from wherever? It's about just people being who, from my point of view, if you want to really be happy and live a healthy long life, it's about being you and doing what brings you joy. And often
Yeah.
I have to say to clients, well, okay, if you can't think now, let's take you back to when you were younger. What did you do then?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
often they can then give me like reel of 10 or 12 different things. Well, I used to like this and I used
Mm.
to like this, and then I'm more okay, so what point did that stop? And I
Mm.
know, I'm not being unrealistic here, because I know what it's like. People get families,
Yeah.
jobs and all that, and mortgages, and
Mm.
they sort of equally, it's like when there's no time. So I think that's a big problem. People have sort of lost that. But also, I don't know whether this is just a UK thing. I don't think it is, but I think in the UK we're probably worst in some respects, or that's my perception of it. But we've been taught, or we have learnt, I don't know which one it is, to reward ourselves with alcohol and food.
Mm.
And that to me is another, again, I can totally understand it. And there's times when, we'll go out and we'll have dinner and we'll have a drink and all that
Mm.
sort of stuff. And again, it's fine. But it's become a culture where,
Mm.
it's like, oh, I did really well on that. I'm going to have a drink, or I've got to Friday. Wow,
It
I'm going to have a drink, or, and I think
yeah.
people have forgotten that there's more ways to reward yourself. you
Yeah,
know.
it seems it comes across as if it's the culture, but personally, my view on it, I don't think it's the culture. This kind of brings me back to a study that they I just remember the study that they did with rats and drugs.
Mm,
So they put I'll tell you the experiment. So they got some lab rats, and basically it's like they made their own little city, a town in this lab for the rats to entertain themselves, but
mm-hmm,
they didn't put anything that was working in the city for them to like use or be entertained by them. So there was a bowl of cocaine and one with water, so because they were bored they just chose to take cocaine.
mm-hmm,
And they did another study, so they put cocaine in a bowl next to some water, and then this time around there was lots of other things for the rats to do,
mm-hmm,
and the rats actually chose to do physical things rather than taking the cocaine. So
mm-hmm,
if I go back to this the culture of this country, it seems like people are just bored. It's like they don't know what to do. It's like they don't know who they are themselves. They don't know what makes them tick. They don't know what gives them joy. So like you said, it's like they just reward themselves at the end of the day. They go to work, they do something that they don't like doing, and then they come home at the end of the day like, okay, I'll just have a beer. But in the
mm.
long run, it's just
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
And I think as well, I don't think this is a choice that people have sort of created, that they wanted to go down this
Mm,
line. I think it's almost like it's a bit of a, and to me, it feels like I don't know, the analogy that comes into my head is like there's a little pipeline that you sort of go down and you just end up here at the end. And you're like, how on earth
mm,
did I get there? Or I suppose some people describe it as the rat race, the treadmill, whatever.
mm,
But I think if people just took a small amount of time to consider, what is it that I want to do, because it's sad really that a lot of people are in that position where they go to work and it's a job that
mm,
they hate, or, whatever it happens to be. Sometimes it's, a relationship that's not great. And I get quite a few people who come in and they'll say to me something like, oh, I want to do a detox.
mm.
And my first response to that is, what do you want to detox
Why?
from?
Yeah.
Because they expect me to think food straight away, So I say, what do
Mm.
you want to detox from? And then it's just another
Alcohol.
searching question where they're like, what do you mean? But it's
Mm.
important. It's really important that they consider that, there's some things that bring you up and there's other things that can sort of drain you, aren't there? So it's
Yeah.
about thinking, is that adding any value, or can I change direction if it's something that is not? And I think it's about getting all that together. And once you've got that happiness, whatever that is, for the individual, because I do, truly believe that is different for every individual, then obviously the need of the alcohol and the need of bad food becomes much, much, much less,
Yeah, it's also been like, I'd also put it down to just being unconsciously living life, like sleepwalking through life, I'd call it.
I think it's a really nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Sleepwalking through life without questioning what it is that so and so is given to you. Just eat it without questioning it.
I think the problem is, though, in terms of what we've just said, people are doing that because, if you are going to a job every single day that you don't like and you're trying to pay your mortgage and looking after the kids and everything else, you're just absolutely exhausted to even consider opening your eyes. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's just that problem of people feel like they're sleepwalking because they've just, at the end of that week, there's just nothing left to give, So, I think I think we will, and I think we are, making changes, and more people are sort of opening their eyes to alternatives like yoga and meditation and things that really do allow people to look a little bit more within.
Although all these things are becoming like a craze, like a new craze with the ice baths and the meditation, do you think this is because everything in moderation can be okay, but do you
Absolutely.
think that, for example, I'll give the ice baths as I use the ice baths as a good example because as to my knowledge and through my research that I've done, I'm aware that you can only spend roughly about 11 minutes per week in an ice bath. And because of this craze of the ice bath and it's making you feel good and people are hearing about it, and now people are going out and buying ice baths. And a friend of mine actually bought an ice bath and he's like, yeah, I've been in my ice bath for about 6 minutes today. And like, I'm doing it every day. So do you think that more harm can be done with these positive things that have come into play?
Yeah, I think I've not done that in terms of the ice bath. I'm just not strong enough yet. But this is somebody who moans like when they go into swimming pool water and says that's too cold. But yeah, I'm sure there's value to be had, and I know like Wim Hof and talks about this and the values, and certainly people I've spoken to, and someone just the other day told me that I can't put it into words how invigorated you feel. Once I've done that, I'm ready for my day. I'm focused, my mind's clear. So I think there are advantages, but absolutely, with all of these things that, come to a sudden popularity, whether it be ice baths or saunas or whatever, you always need to do your due diligence because, certain things, even with certain medical conditions, it's not advised because it can make, certainly
make it
not
worse.
make them worse. It could do even worse than that, so you should always be looking to ask the right questions before you start any new protocols such as that. But I think, like you say, everything in moderation. I think everything's got a place, but it's where it places for you as an individual.
Yeah, so many variables to consider.
Always.
Yeah, so I'm gonna bring this back. I'm gonna ask you a personal question. Like, how did you end up coming down this line of work? What's given you the drive and the motivation to do this work? And what sort of outcome are you looking to achieve? And what fulfillment does it give you to do what you're doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, as with many, lines of work, you sort of go into these lines of work by accident. I always thought that I would be a medical doctor. That was my initial plan. That's what I thought I'd do. And then when it came to it, and I feel that I was quite, or had quite a lot of foresight really at that time because I was only, 21. And I just knew that it wouldn't be for me. But you can imagine that if you set out on that pathway, then to detract from that pathway and tell everybody that you're going to do alternative medicine. It seemed that not so much now, because now actually it would be much more acceptable, but then it was seen as a bit odd. And anything alternative was considered to be snake oil, and so certainly there's been quite a lot of barriers to sort of break down as I've gone, but I've never ever faltered in my beliefs for natural and alternative medicine and the power that it has. you know, and I've stuck with it, you know, building the clinic, a really busy clinic, and thousands of people that have, you know, come to the clinic and got support with whatever it has been in terms of, you know, condition or reason. And so my passion remains really strong, and I'm sure it always will be. But of course, you know, it's quite nice to end the podcast as we started. And now, you know, as well as the clinic, I'm teaching the nutritional practitioners of the future, and I can see, you know, from going to the conferences, you know, some of them medical, some of them health, some of them nutrition, that there is a huge wave of change coming, and people are so much more mindful and happily so much more proactive than they've ever been about their health. You know, there's a real health community coming together now, and you only have to look at programs such as Dragon's Den. You know, every second product is wellness. You know, it's huge now. And yes, as we talked about earlier, not all the messages are great or perfect, but, you know, generally the change is what we wanted to see. So, you know, from my point of view, to have the privilege to teach the nutritional therapists of the future so they can carry on the line of work, that is where I definitely do, you know, see myself now. And it's a joy to see them come through, you know, the courses and graduate to go and, you know, do amazing things. In terms of my hopes and dreams, you know, I think now for me, I'm sort of going into more of this kind of work and more sort of TV speaking, you know, radio, podcasts and social media, which is, again, it's where my heart lies, I suppose, and that is sharing the messages of good health, and also I think making it less complicated. You know, I think there's a lot of people out there try and make them too complicated, you know, and I want it to be accessible and easy to follow for anybody who's got that motivation to make those changes. So yeah, I think my job now is to spread the message of good natural health.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. So yeah, a message for people really would be to be proactive now rather than seeking help when it seems a bit too late.
Yeah, absolutely. Be proactive. Be proactive in your health, and as we've said, you know, throughout the podcast, you know, that can be a really tiny, simple step. You know, I had a lady who I spoke to, and she said to me, "I gave up smoking." I was like, "Well done," but then I was vaping. Yeah, okay. Well, and then I gave up vaping. I'm like, yeah, brilliant, well done. And she's like, but then I'm addicted to sugar-free mints. And I'm like, okay, but we're getting there. You know, and so that's been her journey. And she didn't see the end. She just saw, I'm going to do one thing at a time. And yeah, okay, it's not ideal. She's still having a sugar-free mints every day. But you know what? It's still better than where she started. And I think it's about, you know, individuals looking at, you know, what can I change today that's going to make a difference, and why am I bothering? You know, why would I do it? What do I want to feel like? Because I think, again, people don't know how good they should and could feel. And that's as simple as, you know, people in the morning, your alarm goes off, pressing snooze like 5 times, 6 times. You shouldn't have to. If you're doing that, then you know that, you know, something's not quite right. So from my point of view, certainly, you know, you can do a lot to feel good without having to make a whole vast amount of changes.
Yeah. So eat good to feel good to get your best performance physically and mentally.
Yeah, and find joy.
Yeah, I do swear by eating good. I eat good as much as I can. I must admit I'm a sucker for like sweet foods every now and then, a few beers here and there. But
Like you said,
you know,
moderation is key. You know, moderation is key. You know, you still want to be social. You know, I say to people, you know, follow the 80-20 rule. If you can be good 80% of the time, then you know that you're making a significant difference to your health, and that's as easy as it is. So we should do that. We should have those times. We should have the things that we want now and again. But you know, to feel good and to get out of bed in the morning with energy and to go through the day without feeling sleepy, and you know, all those, it's better to feel motivated to go out and and do something nice, again, it's where we want to be.
I love your message, Kelly. Have you got anything that you'd like to tell people about your services, what you do, if people need any help? The mic is yours.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm Kelly Hopley, Incorporating Wellness, based in Mansfield Woodhouse. So if you do want to start a nutrition journey, or you have something that you need to speak about in terms of your health, then don't hesitate to contact me online. If you go online, you'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, or of course on the website Incorporating Wellness with Kelly Hopley.
Amazing. I have got one question. What is your favorite quote?
Blimey. It's a bit of an old quote now, but it's one that I've stood by for a long time. So it's probably not like really unique or anything like that, but it's stuck sort of with me, and it certainly echoes my life message, I suppose. And it is, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're probably right.
Okay.
And
amazing.
That's what it's all about, that positive mental attitude. If you start out thinking you're going to fail, then you're self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? That's probably my favorite quote. I just think, you've got to believe in yourself and just, forget. I say to a lot of students, and maybe this is a good quote, although it's definitely not a quote in the way that you meant, but I do say to students, stay in your own lane, but keep your windows open. And what I mean by that is just focus on your own journey, but keep your windows open to take any information from good sources that can help you during that journey. Yeah, be open, listen to others,
beliefs. Yep.
But don't compare, just stay in your own lane.
Yeah, and that's how we'll grow. We learn and we grow, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So where are we gonna leave? I think we're gonna leave it there now, Kelly. And I think I had something else left in mind to ask you, but it slipped my mind. My mind's just gone blank.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been lovely to listen to you and talk to you.
No, thanks for your time, and thanks for inviting me, and good luck with your message too, because it's super important. And if you find the meaning, do let me know.
I certainly will.
All right. You take care.
All right.